We are live. Hello and welcome to Broadsheet on the Telly on a Thursday night. It's 10 p.m. My name is John Preposterous Ryan. You're very welcome, Broadsheet readers, commenters, and trolls. Oh my God. A big hello to Vanessa.
We're going to talk about trolls. Sorry, John.
Yeah, well, we might talk about them later. A big hello to celebrity accountant Vanessa Foran.
Hi, everybody.
Johnny Keenan, whom we can't see, but is with us in Offaly, and we're going to be joined by a number of people later, but I'll be announcing them as they come on. But we have a very special guest, Mr. Ken Fox. Ken is a journalist and lecturer at Dublin Institute of Technology in their media course. Is it the journalism course or media course?
Yeah, I on journalism mainly, and I teach on the PR course as well and the public affairs courses too.
Okay, but Ken is probably better known as the freedom of information warrior. Himself and Gavin Sheridan have been involved in freedom of information probably since John O'Donoghue's resignation, or prior to that, obviously.
Yeah, I think before John Donoghue's resignation, for a few years, I'd kind of been dipping my toes in it. When I left college, it would have been 1998, so it would have been just 1 year after it was actually the year the FOI Act came into effect. So we didn't really learn about it in university or anything like that. And I think for a long time, people didn't recognize the capabilities, the how far FOI actually stretched. So when you kind of look back at the articles that were in the papers in those early years, they tended to be of a type, and maybe the scope of it wasn't really understood, just how extensive it was. And I think around that time, it was 2009 when I started to write about John O'Donoghue, and Gavin Sheridan, who I work with on Right to Know. He was starting to do a lot of FOI around that time. He was probably really the one who started to push the boundaries of what you could do, testing the law, see how far you could stretch it, getting kind of data sets for the first time. Nobody had really done that before. Right. And I started to really think about all the other things that we weren't really looking at as hard at as we should have been, decision making in particular, how governments, how ministers make decisions, and what records actually existed. And ever since then, I've kind of self-taught, pushed the boundaries in terms of what I've tried to do. There's only so far you can go. The Act itself is pretty restrictive in many ways. It's brilliant in a lot of ways, but it's also much more restrictive than it would be in other countries.
Ken, can you tell me why that is? Because we used the Freedom of Information, sort of a template act, didn't we? That was adopted in America and in Britain.
We did, and at the time it was, the real champion of FOI in Ireland is Edna Fitzgerald from the Labour Party, and we should always, remember the huge role that she played in this. And at the time, they visited a lot of different countries. They went to Australia. I think they went to some of the Scandinavian countries as well to look at kind of best practice and what other countries did. Yeah. But as happens in Ireland, then the civil service creeps in. They didn't really want it anyway. Well, no. And you kind of ended up with, a strong FOI Act, but that had a lot of exemptions in it. And it's the FOI Act that we have is full of exemptions for things like commercial sensitivity, when decision-making processes are ongoing, loads of different things like this. And when Edna Fitzgerald introduced it, she always said that these exemptions were traffic lights, or kind of amber lights. So they weren't stop signs. They were like, if this record really needs to be kept secret, you can use these exemptions. But otherwise, you should make an assumption that every record is public. But what actually happened was the reverse, whereby the assumption is every record is private, and we will then go through the exemptions to find out in what way we can block its release. And only if we can't find an excuse not to release it, then we'll put it into the public domain. And I think one of the things that happened because of that was back as well when people were testing it out. Richie Oakley in the Sunday Tribune, he would have been the first one that ever really got political expenses. So up until then, the Oireachtas had fought tooth and nail to keep politicians' expenses out of the public domain, and he won a big case back then.
Yeah.
And after that, you know, political expenses became something that you could get. And you'll often hear people say, oh, journalists are obsessed with political expenses and so on, and that's all they ever do FOI for. And one of the reasons was it wasn't necessarily to do with the fact that this was the only area we were interested in. It was a lot to do with the fact that this was one of the only areas where we knew we could get access to the documents and we wouldn't face this big long string of exemptions, because the case kind of law, even though there isn't case law as such, but the decisions were there, the decisions were really strong, and to an extent they were like having a precedent to back you up, you know, when you went to battle with them.
The expenses scandal, the breaking of that was the Sunday Tribune's last sort of great act, I guess.
Yeah, it was kind of probably the last hurrah of the Tribune, and it was only a year later that it shut, you know, and it's just, you know, there's great Sunday papers. I think it's still missed to a degree, but I suppose, you know, it's the inevitability of the print industry in Ireland was that there was always going to be a whittling down of the number of titles that there were, and it's a shame, but that's part and parcel of what's happening in every country in the world.
Well, there doesn't seem to be anybody of your expertise working full-time on a newspaper. I mean, I know that you freelance sometimes with the Mail, sometimes with the Independent.
Oh, I freelance with everybody, but mostly with the Mail on Sunday and with the Sunday Times. And there'd be a few, you know, there's not that many journalists who really specialise in FOI, but there's a few really excellent ones like Mark Tighe in the Sunday Times, Colin Coyle in the Sunday Times as well. Conal O'Farta in the Examiner, people like that, you know. There's you know, you're probably looking at about 10 or 12 who use it all the time. And I suppose one of the reasons for that is with the way the newspaper industry has changed, you know, particularly for daily reporters, you know, who are under a lot of pressure, probably doing a couple of stories every day. For you to find the time to do the FOI requests, it gets harder and harder, you know, and if you're flat out all day, you know, to find that couple of hours you need isn't always that easy. And FOI, it can be a kind of a laborious process. It's kind of one for pedantic people, to be quite honest, and people who don't mind.
Ken, do you teach
mind-numbing detail?
Do you teach it as part of the course in DIT?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, because I'm particularly strong on teaching it to young journalists, because I think it's a great leveler for journalism. You know, where if you want to be a political reporter, you need to be in Leinster House, and you need to have the special advisors' numbers, and you need the friendly minister who'll give you a leak. If you want to be a crime reporter, you need to know guards. You know. You need not to be annoying them. You know, you need to keep them on side. Whereas to be a good FOI reporter, everybody can dislike you. Everybody can want to. Nobody wants to cooperate with me, but you know, it's the law. I don't, and I would say, in fairness as well, like I do have I kind of do half my time teaching, half my time in journalism, but. I suppose FOI, it lends itself to the way that I do my work these days, because I can do it kind of on a specific day. So I might do 30 FOI requests in a single day. That's what I'd usually do.
Ken,
and I try and kind of keep it going like that.
Can I ask you, I mean, when Richard Oakley did his expenses thing, and if Conal O'Farta does the adoption stuff, they know what they're looking for. I mean, you're a general FOI guy. What do you know what to look for in any given situation? Could I give you an example? For instance, you've got the Terry Prone and Noreen O'Sullivan FOI request that you had made, and they came back and said there was nothing. But do you appeal this? Like, how do you know? Like, have you got some sixth sense, or what do you know what to look for?
Well, I suppose the one thing, like, I would say is, you know, just because I might not be popular with politicians and senior civil servants doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other people who like to help me, you know. So sources is part of it.
So they actually say to you, Ken, would you have a look at this particular area? And that might be something that you wouldn't have any idea about, but you just
that would be probably, I would say, you could, maybe a third of the FOI requests I would do would be pretty targeted. I know what I'm looking for.
Sure.
I wouldn't really, I won't say which ones, but like I don't even always know the people that are helping me.
Okay.
People do help me, and then a lot of the time it's just, I read all the papers because I have to, because it's part of my job, and then I see as well in the daily papers in particular, again, because people are under pressure to file stories, and sometimes the why and the how in the story is just left hanging there, and you see such and such a decision was made, but like there's no real rationale given for it, or you don't know the background to it. And every time I see something like that, I go, oh, hang on a second, who benefited from that decision? Who pushed that, or who lobbied to have that changed? And those are the processes that I look into. But I have the luxury of time, maybe that some journalists wouldn't necessarily, especially, as I said, daily paper people and people in radio and TV who are, under the cosh all day long.
It is like, although you say it's quite simple, it is a complicated process. And if you're not of that, if you don't have that aptitude, like you say, the pedantic, the kind of slightly obsessive, I guess. Nature,
like I would always say it's a really simple process too. Like it's to actually send an FOI request is the simplest thing in the world. You just find out what the FOI email address of the public body is, and you send them an email and say, under the FOI Act 2014, I want X, Y, and Z. And then it's after that you get into the nitty gritty of people asking for too much, or people asking for
sorry, Ken, I don't want to interrupt, but for instance, like the Disclosures Tribunal prompted you to do an FOI on Terry Prone and Noreen O'Sullivan and Francis Fitzgerald. Is that right?
Yeah, I would have been. It would have been the general reporting that was going on at the time.
But they came back to you and said that there was no correspondence. But then you said, well, can you check again? And they said, you just assumed there would be more.
No, it didn't make any sense that there was no correspondence, because I knew from documents that I had from the Oireachtas that Frances Fitzgerald had not a contract. She had a consultancy in place with the communications clinic. She was using an allowance that she gets from the Oireachtas as a minister to pay Terry Prone to give her media advice. She'd been doing this for years.
Yeah, when she
was in different departments as well, and the communications clinic, is obviously always a popular choice amongst very senior politicians. Yeah. They obviously like the services that they provide. So when they said there were no records, like there was no, it didn't require any great insight from me. It just didn't make any sense. Well, also, I suppose I should say as well that the department involved would be well recognized as having the worst reputation of dealing with FOI in a proper fashion. Them and a couple of others who would be named in the Information Commissioner's report every year as failing to respond to requests. So I just didn't believe them, to be quite honest with you. So
well, also during the Disclosure Tribunal, although it was redacted, there were clearly emails from Terry Prone to Noreen and Francis. So they had clearly been disingenuous with the actuality with you.
Yeah, and I mean, what they're saying now is that they did the searches in good faith and they didn't find the material. I don't really buy that for a second. If somebody asked me to search for emails between you and I, or you and anybody else, it takes, you put the name into the search box. It's not, not terribly complicated to find people's emails. And I think sometimes there's this idea put out there that trawling for records is like you're going into, some dusty basement full of filing cabinets looking for records that haven't been seen in 10 years, when the reality is you're talking about, usually putting one word or 5 different words in the search box of an email account. And again, I suppose why I pushed the aspect related to the use of private email addresses is because I think it's my not suspicion. It's kind of common knowledge at this stage that ministers and special advisors in particular are using kind of parallel communication methods, because they're aware that if they use their official work email address, that's going to end up in an FOI. Whereas if they keep it off-site, keep it in Gmail, keep it on WhatsApp or whatever it is, and there's less chance that the civil servants go and looking for it. But the reality is, and every journalist, every member of the public should be aware of this, if people are doing official state business on their via text message, via WhatsApp, via Facebook Messenger, via Gmail, whatever it is, those records are absolutely 100% subject to the FOI Act, and there is no doubt about that. And I think the important thing is that it gets into the heads of the people who are dealing with these requests, that when they start looking for records, that they go searching in all the proper places and not just in one single email address. Yeah,
it must be said, Ken, that the Department of Justice were late handing documents over to the tribunal, so you're not being personally treated any differently than I suppose anybody else dealing with the Department of Justice, I guess.
No, and I would even say that over the past, it's very early days, but even over the past few months, I've seen some slightly encouraging signs from the Department of Justice in terms of dealing with FOI requests.
Right.
Whereby they do appear to be getting them out on time. The answers appear to be a little bit more thorough than they previously would have been. As I said, it's very early days.
Sure.
Could be coincidence, but I'd like to think maybe that 5 years of controversy after controversy on Garda Síochána and the Department of Justice, perhaps we might finally recognize that this total lack of transparency is a disaster for organizations. And when organizations are allowed to operate in total secrecy like this, scandals follow them like night after day.
And as like Charlton was pretty scathing about the Department of Justice's slowness on that, so that may have kind of kicked them where it hurts or where it matters. Ken, I just want to introduce Kevin Higgins is a lawyer. He's involved with the Tuam Survivors Network. Kevin, good evening. Kevin's in Galway. Kevin, you're obviously very used.
Not in Galway, John. I'm in Laois.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Kevin.
The road to Galway is well trodden, but I'm based in Laois.
Okay, sorry. Kevin, Ken is a bit of a hero at Broadsheet Towers because he does this very, very difficult and tedious work for very little money. But
I follow Ken's work very, very closely, as I think he probably knows. And I just would like to congratulate him on the perseverance in this particular case of the Terry Prone and Noreen O'Sullivan emails. But if I may, just for a moment, Ken, I think you're being very kind to some departments, possibly too kind, and to some civil servants, senior civil servants, because there's no doubt in my mind that many highly placed civil servants have absolute contempt for freedom of information legislation. And although you're not saying this, I'm saying this, they frequently simply do lie. There's no doubt about that. They do. And I think in the case of where they said nothing existed, perhaps they're falling back on the slightly Jesuitical argument that it was not departmental email address that we use, it was Gmail. I don't know if all that you have uncovered fall into that category, but it appeared to me that's what they were trying on with you in the first instance. I don't know if I'm correct in that.
Ken?
Well, there's kind of reams of material which I only got today, and I'm kind of going through it slowly because as I'm back teaching now, so priority number one is the teaching jobs. The journalism is very much a part-time thing, but most of it was on the official email. They just the addresses weren't searched. It didn't happen. I really think excuse that I was given by the department, I'm just not buying it. It's not really plausible for me, I'm reasonably good with technology, but I'm certainly no expert. But the excuse is given. I wouldn't necessarily buy them. But what I'd really like to see is, there's only very little one journalist can do sometimes when it comes to things like this, and I would like to see. At least at some point, somebody ask the Minister for Justice about it, to see the current Minister for Justice about this, and also about what they're going to do in future to improve their performance. As I said, there's the possibility that they've taken on board some of the flack they've taken, and there is this appearance of a slight improvement, and I hope that continues. And I deal with IFOI, there's probably about 60 public authorities that I kind of have a list of. And when I'm doing my FOIs, I go through all of them and I ask myself, are they doing anything interesting at the moment? And at least half of them I have good experiences with, and with some of them I have really, really excellent experiences with, where they give the decisions quickly. You get all the records, they give you the embarrassing material, there's no messing around. They often do much more work than they probably should, because there is a 5-hour kind of threshold of how much work they're actually supposed to do on an FOI before they charge you. But equally, Kevin, I think you're right that there is at a level of the civil service a deep-seated kind of suspicion of the FOI Act, and we saw that in action obviously back in 2003 when Charlie McCreevy changed the FOI Act to introduce fees and to introduce basically he gutted the original act at that time, and that was civil service led. And then in 2014, again civil service led, they almost made the FOI Act more restrictive again, whereby they were going to, I won't get into the details of explaining this because it is a bit technical, but whereby they were going to charge people multiple times for what were known as multifaceted requests.
That's right, and it would have cost you like thousands a month, wouldn't it?
Well, what basically that was specifically in response to Gavin Sheridan and me, who had kind of pioneered this approach, which was just basically a money saving approach, where if I was sending an FOI request to the Oireachtas, instead of putting one thing in it, I would look for 7 or 8 things, and arguably it was an slight abuse of the process by us, but it was this was going to be cracked down on in the new act, and there were a whole load of other things that where this kind of Labour had come into government promising to bring back the original FOI Act, and it nearly, really, really nearly, and if not genuinely, if not for Gavin Sheridan's campaigning at that time, that would have happened. And only he got the ball rolling on this and got people talking about it, got the newspapers amped up about it. And Brendan Howlin had a kind of a bit of an about face on it. Yeah. And he went back to what Labour had said they were going to do when they came into government, which was restore it to its original status, as in there would be no fees. Oh no, it did. There was no fees, and he also extended it to, for instance, Nama. He extended it to An Garda Síochána, as limited as that is. Yeah. And
the fee structure isn't still in place, though, isn't it, Ken? In a way,
FOI requests are free.
But isn't there over a certain? If there's a certain amount of research to be done, the meter starts running.
There is, but that would not be unique to FOI in Ireland. That would be, and I, to be honest with you, I would be of the opinion that is reasonable, and most departments are pretty reasonable about doing that. They don't charge.
Yeah. Did the Terry Brown, Noreen O'Sullivan, did that cost you now to get that extra appeal?
That didn't cost. The internal review would have cost me €30 personally, and the right to know €50 for the appeal to the Information Commissioner, and that's we people donate to Right to Know, and that's what we put the money towards appeals and towards the legal fees that we run up. I pay for the internal reviews myself, But it's not, it's.
Right to know.
I
Right to know is
I don't review most decisions. Most of the time I get what I'm looking for. So
right. Just to clarify that Right to Know.ie is a non-profit, and it was set up by Gavin Sheridan and Fred Logue. Is that right?
Yeah, Gavin Sheridan and Fred Logue and Malachi Brown, who now works with the New York Times, and Malachi moved to New York, and I became a director of Right to Know then. But yeah, it would be really the brainchild of the work Gavin had done through the story.ie and a kind of a continuation of that. And as I said, it's a not-for-profit, and we pursue kind of public interest cases where we test out the law to the limits, and not just freedom of information, but also there's other access laws. There's very powerful access law for information on the environment, for instance. And it's particularly strong. It would be much stronger than FOI in many ways, except, of course, that it only applies to environmental information. But a lot of the exemptions and restrictions that we have for FOI don't apply for these environmental access requests.
Because these are private companies they're dealing with, or is that?
No, because it's EU legislation, and basically its definition of what constitutes a public authority is much wider than what the FOI Act says. So, for instance, people might recall, they might not, that Gavin Sheridan would have taken a case against NAMA to have NAMA found to be, they made an information request to NAMA at a time when it wasn't subject to the FOI Act, and eventually they won that case. Pointlessly, NAMA claimed it wasn't a public authority, which is and continued to claim it was a public authority even at a time when they were about to be brought under the FOI Act, and continued to run up large legal bills, even while they knew they were about to be designated as a public body in a different piece of legislation. But again, that's a different story.
Ken, I'm aware that you have to get an early start in the morning. You're back to school or back to college, and I wanted to ask you about your students and over the last few years and their thoughts. But Vanessa Foran is with us also, and Johnny Keenan in Offaly. And I don't know if Vanessa's an accountant, so I don't know if Vanessa's ever had to use FOIs. Have you, Vanessa?
No, but I've been the subject of FOIs, all right.
Okay.
Looking for information, yeah.
And have you reluctantly handed over your... Okay. Johnny, have you ever had use of the FOI? Have we lost you, Johnny?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Can you hear me there, John?
Yep.
Yeah. No, but I'm really interested in Ken's work, and fair play to him. I found it very interesting around the time when they were going through the Fianna Fáil boom party and Mary Harney, and I think there was something there with Foss. Foss are very, very much into their karaoke nights out. And what's called John Donovan, is this the Minister for Transport from Kerry?
Yeah, John O'Donoghue. We were
O'Donoghue.
Yeah, no, Ken.
So he go from one side of Heathrow to another in a car, and it cost a ridiculous amount of money. I think it was the FAI who gave us all that. So, Ken, I don't know where you were knocking around back then.
Yeah, he was. Ken is the architect of much of this. With
what was the most interesting, let's say, expenses list you found through a government department?
It was probably those John O'Donoghue ones that I got, the limo in Heathrow to take him between terminals. There was the water taxis in Venice, hat hire at one of the race meetings in the UK, and interestingly, the first one you mentioned was done by it was Roddy Malloy, but the journalism in that was done by Shane Ross, the current Minister for Transport, and his and Nick Webb. But
the minister was Mary Coughlin.
Oh, that's right. In fact, their book, their first book, is largely that story, really, isn't it?
It is, and I suppose a lot of the
wasters.
Wasters. Yeah, it wasn't unique to Foss. Well, Foss were, I suppose, became the kind of the lightning rod for the public bodies because they were the worst, in the same way as John O'Donoghue later became the lightning rod for a political system that was fairly rotten. But I always I kind of look back on it with some, it's it didn't exactly lead where I expected it to. They introduced a new expenses system that was actually less transparent than the one that came previously. So sometimes the results that you anticipate don't end up being exactly, what you expect. And one of the things that they did after that was, I think they made a decision, well, we're not going to get caught out like this again.
No.
And
See, sorry, there. You see, the one thing about the expenses that you'd assume either they're each department, they have a finance department as well, and they'd have internal auditors themselves. You think they might kind of flag breaches, or even the auditor controller general. Like, this is what a lot of the. I suppose it's sexy to talk about all the expenses and what Roddy Malloy got in his pension, and John O'Donoghue and the curtains in the Count Corda's office that are now gone. It's that's kind of sexy, and people are interested in that. But a lot of that information, the auditor and controller general should have caught and exposed anyway, or questioned. So you've had internal audit, their own finance department. Those departments are audited as well by external auditors, and all those semi-states have external auditors. And then you have and you still have to go to freedom of information to actually get detail when there's all these sort of safety nets that just failed.
Vanessa?
Yeah.
Sorry, Ken, cutting across you. Back in 2008, 2009, I was taking a particular interest in false money, which was being disseminated through a particular local authority by way of social employment schemes. And ultimately, through perseverance, I got to talk to somebody in the finance department, in internal audit, in FOSS. And I won't tell you the chap's name, but I told him what I had found at that time. And he said to me, in a very disarming way, he said, when this organization was set up, I think it's in its previous incarnation, it may have been called ANCO, the training.
ANCO.
Yeah.
He said, when we were set up 20 years ago, we had an annual budget of £100 million. He said, 20 years on, we have a budget of £1 billion. Mm-hmm. He said, when we were set up, we had 4 internal auditors. He said, today, I've got me and one other guy, and he's retiring. That was in 2009.
You would have had an unemployment rate when it was set up of well in excess of 10%, and when this scandal was going on, the unemployment rate was down at 4 or 5%. But I don't know if a lot of the expenses controversy when it really boiled down to it is there were no actual rules in place, so nobody ever broke any rules. There were no guidelines. Ministers could stay where they wanted. FOSS could spend money how they wanted.
No,
so there were no policies. So those policies, they all came in that 2009, 2010 period. Yeah. So, and a lot of those policies are still in use today, and maybe only now being slightly relaxed because of the changed kind of economic environment.
May I? Sorry. Vanessa,
do you mind? I took a big interest in the false story. It's called something else now again. Solace, right. I took a big interest in it because I suppose there was obviously the expenses and the whole Roddy Malloy pension thing and what he was getting paid as well. But and people attached to that story and the video company of his nephew and all this thing, people attached to that story. But I think actually the shameful part of it all was ANCO was set up to kind of manage trades and get people started in trades, for whether it was welding or brick building and they went from there into as apprentices, and they did their off-site training in FOSS or ANCO, and then it became FOSS. So they were the center for developing the trades, the master tradesmen going on, and that sort of they sort of all the good work they had done in the 60s and 70s and 80s, you know, from hairdressing to welders to plumbers to sign writers, you know, bricklayers, painters and decorators, car mechanics. Because I remember Anco was actually at the back of my mother's house in Cork at the time, and then they had a huge facility out in Bishopstown. I mean, they had everything there, and all that is now gone. That tradition of developing trade, you know, craftspeople and tradesmen, and you know that we're all over the world. I mean, you know, I mean, you go to New York, the richest man in the richest paddy in New York is the mechanic or the plumber. You know.
Well, I think Solis are continuing the Anco tradition. Ken, is that not right, or am I?
I don't know much about what they really do anymore. They've kept a very low profile since the renaming was part of that rebrand, because the false name had become so toxic. But certainly the budget wouldn't be anything approaching what it would have been then. And yeah, I think maybe some of the good work that they were doing at the time probably got lost in the mists of time.
Ken, may I ask you regarding, say, for instance, Terry Prone? Would you, if you FOI all correspondence between Terry Prone and all departments, is that too wide a net to send in a request like that?
It probably would be too wide, because technically when you make a request, that request, if you don't put a date on it, means that it's from 1998 to 2018. So it should cover a 20-year period. And considering that business has been operational all through that time, there could be records going all the way back. So for a start, you'd have to cut the dates, you know. So oftentimes I might look for a year or 6 months or 3 months even. Okay. So that could be one way to reduce them. In terms of, you know, I don't think that's a colossal amount of records though for a lot of departments.
Okay, but the request then FOI all correspondence between all departments and the communications clinic between 2008 and 2018. That would be a reasonable request, would it?
I think that would be too big as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, it's written into the Act so that a Freedom of Information request that takes 5 hours to deliver. So if you imagine what a civil servant does in 5 hours, that anything up to 5 hours should be free. Anything up to 25 hours, after it gets above 25 hours, I think it is, it's the €500 limit. They can refuse the request as being voluminous. So if a person is likely to be tied up working on this for a full week, it can automatically be turned down as being voluminous. What one of the useful things that the new Act introduced was, if a department is going to turn around to you and say that request is way too big, they have to come back to you and offer suggestions or offer you the opportunity to bring down the scope of it to something more manageable. So what people will often do is say, if, you know, so those general kind of trawls can be difficult. But if you think there's a specific thing that happened, a decision was made last May, so you're probably thinking, you know, all the really juicy records are going to be in that April, March, February period. So maybe you could say the requests, all the records from the 1st of February 2018 to the 31st of May 2018. And if it comes back and there's 3 emails, you know, then you could probably extend it out further, you know, make the date range a bit longer. So there's kind of techniques you can do to try and make it manageable for them. But I suppose the thing that often gets people is that volume issue. So people will regularly contact me for advice about requests, and the most frequent one would be that people have come back and said, you're just looking for too much. You know, you're saying, I want all correspondence related to the repeal the 8th referendum from the Department of Health for a year. You know what I mean? And you're literally talking probably tens of thousands of documents.
Ken, what's your feelings on that conflict of interest between, say, Terry Prone advising both Noreen and Frances, just as a journalist, and also the Tume thing? I mean, she's advising the nuns while also advising Minister for Francis Fitzgerald, who was Minister for Children at the time of the Tuam discovery. Sorry, Ken.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, I don't know if I'd call it a conflict of interest as such. It's something that I find a little bit strange, because it seems to me that we always hear, particularly when it comes to the Garda Síochána and the Department of Justice, anytime it comes up, Department of Justice, it's, the Garda is an independent body and it makes its own decisions and it's nothing to do with us. And if you ask the guards something about the department, it's, that's a departmental matter, that's nothing to do with us. So it does seem like to be advising two sides of the same coin. I don't know. If I like that idea, but at the same time, if the minister's happy and the Garda Commissioner's happy and the business involved is happy, then I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's anything wrong.
I think conflict of interest is the wrong term, because their interests are completely compatible. But
she's getting paid one way or the other, so.
But she's getting paid twice on that.
Maybe she is. But you see, Terry Prone would call herself a gun for hire, like a barrister. that's their excuse. We're guns for hire. That they might represent. So that's what she'd say. And she's in private practice
when you're representing the nuns, and then you're also representing the Minister for Children, and you're also representing the guards. I mean, Kevin.
And then gets to go on RTE and sit on the couch and show and tell all her clients, "This is the access I have. I am here in the RTE Late Show."
Well, that's
I don't have to be good at my job. I have this access.
Yeah.
That's
not only the access. She will never be asked. She will never be put to asked about any of this stuff. This is the point.
That to me would be the bigger issue. Is that if people are representing organizations in whatever fashion and they then are on the national broadcaster, for that not to be known to the audience, I think that's something I would have.
Well, hang on. Sorry, but Ken, there was a bill that was defeated, and I think after heavy lobbying by Terry Prone, in fact, that this bill was defeated regarding that people going on television shows and radio shows have to declare an interest in. If I'm advising Leo Varadkar and I'm talking about Leo Varadkar on the Marion Finucane show, I need to be able to say that, or it needs to be said that I'm representing Leo Varadkar. But this law,
or if you're a mortgage broker,
and it happened with the Iona Institute during the repeal referendum as well, a couple of times, where people who would be kind of lesser known members of that organization were kind of introduced as panelists without that affiliation. And I think if for instance, if I was on a radio show in the morning and I was to be talking about, for instance, third level funding or anything to do with, college further education, and it wasn't mentioned that I was a lecturer in DIT, I think that would be wrong of the broadcaster. It's not to do with the person. It would be wrong of the broadcaster. All your interests, if you go on as a panelist, as in, and people are taking you as kind of, well, this person is an honest broker, I'm taking everything they say at face value. You need to have that information to know, well, why are they saying that, or what kind of angle are they coming at this from?
But Ken, you must listen to the radio and be aghast then, because that is what goes on all the time. I mean, there's people with so many direct interests in what they're talking about in terms of either financial or political, and yet they don't reveal these and the interviewer doesn't either.
No, but the definition of conflict of interest is very understandable. It's is this relationship capable of influencing your decision? Now, I always qualify it as fee influence. The fees I get from this crowd so much that I might kind of favor to keep that rather than give this impartial advice, and then the sort of the special interest then of going on to Marion to talk about the newspapers, but not saying, well, actually I get 500,000 from AIB every year and 500,000 from another crowd every year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's we have this is our little show here, Ken, right? And we was it the 8th referendum debate we did, and there was a man on, right? And of course, first thing out of John's mouth was, now there's a bit of a transparency issue here. He's Vanessa's hairdresser.
All right.
And then what was the other one about? It was Jimmy.
Oh, for product placement.
Do you know what I mean? Like, if we go to the trouble of doing it, and even in my case, I would tell clients, well, actually, your ex-husband is engaged me as well, and they know to be fine.
Okay.
See, I just tell everybody everything. So
does that okay?
It does happen, yeah.
I'll talk about that in a second. Kevin?
A moment, Jonathan.
Sorry, Johnny, 1 second. Kevin?
Sorry, the use of the term conflict of interest has a place and an application regularly. But I think in terms of whether we describe it as lobbying or representation or public relations, clearly in the Irish context and the size and nature of this country, we need a piece of legislation which includes the term contrary to the public interest.
Yeah.
And in my view, the role which Terry Prone has played at times in Irish public life, and you only have to look at the intimacy of the emails between her, the Garda Commissioner, and simultaneously the Minister for Justice.
Do you know what?
Sorry. Her role has been contrary to the public interest, and it has been corrosive of the public interest. And quite simply, it is something which needs addressing. There's no doubt about that in a legislative form.
It really does.
Yeah.
But you see, like she's serving her company's interest.
Okay.
And so you see, it's up to those that engage her,
Vanessa,
to make those decisions.
Vanessa, but we've come to a stage with the communications clinic and Terry Prone that, for instance, she was advising Kevin Reynolds while her husband was head of RT Authority, which agreed £1 million payment to Kevin Reynolds over a libel on. What I'm saying is that she works both sides of all these stories.
Yes,
most of the scandals that we've worked on in the last 8 years.
I know, John. I'm just being devil advocate here. It's the people that engage her. They need to know that she doesn't care. She is the figurehead of a company.
Of course, but I know, and like Dennis O'Brien has his enablers, and I understand that they are the issue really, because she's doing nothing illegal. She's perfectly in her rights.
Perfectly entitled to do that.
If you're talking about a conflict of interest, is like Sean O'Rourke's wife was working on Morning Ireland, then she went over to the Department of Justice, and now she's Charlie Flanagan's advisor.
There's no conflict of interest
And
there.
Sean O'Rourke interviews Charlie Flanagan prominently enough. There's no conflict of interest there, no?
No, that's not conflict of interest, but there would be a transparency issue. He should say at the top of that interview, is actually my wife is employed in this department.
Exactly.
But it's a disclosure issue. It's not a conflict of interest issue.
But Vanessa, 1 second, Johnny. I know, but there was a law that was there was a I think it was about 3 years ago now, Ken. Was it? There was a bill that was going to be passed that you had to give full disclosure, but it never even reached whatever stage, the first stage of.
I don't know if there was a bill that would have applied to broadcasters on that front, but if certainly, I think
it was
like Vanessa said, if there is I don't necessarily think that's a conflict of interest either, but I think it can be addressed by saying at the beginning, I think it's in the interests of, I think in the interests of the listeners, you should know about this, because also if you're not upfront about these things, then you kind of give ammunition to people who want to see problems where there might not always be problems. Okay. I suppose on the more general point of, people involved in public relations being panelists and so on broadcast programs, that's a really, really tricky area automatically. Because you don't know who their clients are, and oftentimes there's no way of finding out who people's clients are. So it's a tricky area, and something I think that broadcasters should take considerable care when
Ken,
dealing with.
can I ask you a question there? And I don't know whether it was said here before, but do you know, calling people PR people, and I think that these people are lobbyists. It's plain and simple lobbying on behalf of special interests.
Well, Ken,
And they're paid to promote that, and that's their livelihood. And no, I'm not criticizing that. Everyone's entitled to earn a livelihood. But this thing of calling themselves PR, you know, I find that a bit cloudy myself. I mean, they're lobbyists.
Well, I think somebody like Terry Prone is a public relations person, right? But I think there is a blurring between lobbying and PR at the moment, isn't there, Ken? Or there has been over the last few years.
Oh, well, 100%. 100%. A lot of the entries on the lobbying register would be from companies who are also involved in public relations. I don't think that's a new thing. I don't know if the distinction between public relations and lobbying is as big as maybe. I think a lot of people see those things somewhat interchangeably anyway. That lobbying would be part of your PR business.
Is it time to identify them as two separate functions?
Well, we do. We have the lobbying register, and certainly I think the lobbying register has worked reasonably well. And we can all go on to, I think it's lobbying.ie, and see who's been going, seeing which government department and which government minister, and they have to declare that. And I think that's been a considerable success. And you will regularly see freedom of information requests to departments basically saying, I want copies of all records relating to this listing on the lobbying register. So that has definitely opened up the lobbying business to scrutiny in a way that it certainly wouldn't have been up until then.
Yeah, no, I give you an example now, quite a recent one, and I'm sorry to bring it up, Mr. Naughton, because I know you're a fan. Is the phone call Dennis Naughton got? You know, it was John thought it was going to be a bigger story. I never thought it was going to be a story, and about taking a call from this gentleman, and his name on a PR firm, but he wasn't. The guy was a lobbyist. But everywhere it said it was a PR.
Was it O'Nocton? Was it?
O'Nocton, yeah.
He was the former advisor,
government press officer, yeah.
He was,
but you know, he was identified as a PR business, PR person. In actual fact, he was a lobbyist.
Well, I think John was right.
I mean?
I think a lot of people thought that was going to be a bigger story than it was, and I think there were quite a few relieved people when it didn't blow up into a bigger issue, because it certainly could have. Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely an area that we need. You know, there can be no amount of transparency that you know that can't help when we're looking into that kind of intersection between political life, public relations, lobbying, and so on. And I think it's really can be complicated even further by the fact that Ireland is so small that there can be very close personal relationships within these things, whereas perhaps in the UK and the US it mightn't quite be as, you know, there mightn't be that level of linkages between people, you know, moving from one PR firm to a special advisor into journalism in between these businesses. I think that always in an Irish context has a tendency to make these things worse than happens in other countries.
Ken, sorry, Vanessa.
There's just something from the chatbot, if you don't mind. And don't worry, chatbot, I'll be having words with you later.
Okay.
And Andrew.
Sorry, can we have a chat pit, like a mosh pit at the electric picnic?
It's not. There's a running comment box here as it goes. Anyway, Andrew Brennan has said there should be an advisory warning before Prone appears on TV or radio, like tobacco packets.
Okay. Somebody, Orla, has asked Ken, because I know you've become a pumpkin in about 2 minutes owing to your early start. But
no, I'm okay.
Would love to know Ken's thoughts on young journalists coming through college, his thoughts on them, and particularly in DIT, because I think they're a nice caliber of journalists, I have to say, come out of
Simon Harris.
Well, he dropped out, didn't he, Ken?
I'm not sure about that because
Okay,
I
I
wasn't
think that was
there.
just-
at the time.
One of his
But-
lecturers told me he did, so that's
Okay. Well, I think he might have been DCU, not DIT. But Ken, what are your thoughts on these young journalists? Are they good? Good.
I think there's this kind of the slight difference between when I studied in DCU, so it would have been, I graduated in 1998, and I think from my class there was probably maybe 30 of us, and there were quite a few people in my class who were really just hell bent on being journalists, newspaper journalists, and that was the thing that woke them up in the morning, and they went to bed thinking about that. And quite a few of those people, and I wasn't actually one of them, are working in journalism now, doing very well for themselves. And more so now, I don't really see that with the classes that I teach. They're not necessarily watching All the President's Men before they go to bed every night, but they have a broader kind of media interest. You know, they love social media, they love online media. You know, they're not so concerned about newspapers, and we're all going to have to get our head around that. You know, they really aren't.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine
podcasts. They watch Netflix. They're not watching necessarily prime time. You know, their interests are very disparate. It's hard to pin it down. And what they're very interested in is media more generally. And I suppose in some ways that's good, because those kind of traditional, like, go work for a local newspaper, cover the courts and the councils, or, you know, do the same in the Herald or, you know, the Indo or the Times or whatever, those positions maybe aren't as, there mightn't be as many of those as there were, but there's plenty of work out there for young journalists, you know, and they're not, as I said, not all of them want to be specifically reporters. So they'll go into doing social media, they'll go into doing content for websites and so on. So there's a whole variety. I think where they end up is much more diverse.
Would they include now? Would they include things like social influencing and like, is that part of the new media? Like, do you really embrace new media?
Really interested in influencers, you know, and Instagram culture. That's something that you like. For instance, last year, quite a few people would have done their dissertations on exactly that, kind of the roles of influencers. Again, that intersection between influencer and PR and the problematic nature of people, you know, promoting products that they're pretending, or not pretending, but, you know, that they're saying, isn't this the best product in the world? And how much have they been paid to do it, and so on. And, you know, the PRII, or if that's what it's called, it's kind of the industry body for the public relations industry, has put out, you know, interesting set of guidelines on how you're supposed to do these posts, you know, to make it clear that it's an ad, or to make it clear that it's sponsored. And they are very interested in that. But it's you know, that stuff is really interesting too. And it means kind of that the research as well, it tends to be, you know, when they all come to do their thesis at the end, it's really diverse. So again, when I was graduating, and it was all like, let's go and interview a few newspaper reporters or a few TV reporters, or let's go and look at a rake of newspapers around the time that a shocking crime happened and do an analysis. Now it's kind of, it can be a really fascinating mix, and people, you know, some of the stuff that I've seen has just been really terrific.
Well, so bodes well for the future in terms of whatever the landscape will look like. We'll have some.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's something I have to say, like, it's something that it's probably one of my biggest kind of bugbears, is you hear so many people saying about falling standards and, you know, snowflake generation and all of this stuff. And I just don't see, I don't really see any, I don't see that. I also see, I find kids that they're not kids, they're young adults, but I find them, you know, so respectful, so easy to work with, so willing to take advice, so willing to look for your help, so polite. And I just, when I hear people talking about, you know, the future is bleak and how much better it was from, you know, some 65-year-old politician who drove the country literally into the toilet and then tells me that these young people are the problem. And we see it again with the protests surrounding housing.
Yeah.
You know, again,
I know.
these people have the cheek to turn around and say, you know, you need to put your faith in politics and we'll fix it for you. And everything is told them. How could anybody believe that was the case?
Well, I'm delighted now.
Is politics a big thing for them, Ken? Is Irish politics a big thing for your students?
They all study politics. I don't teach them politics, so I teach them kind of more. So a lot of the teaching that I do is actually more on the kind of learning, not learning how to write, obviously, because they know how to write, but learning how to write kind of news stories, features, you know, because there's obviously a specific knack to writing introductions and quoting people and all of those things. So it's not like any writing they've generally done before they've come to college. So I don't teach them the politics, but you know, again, I would say
it's a core subject in journalism, yeah.
Oh, it is, and it always has been, you know, and law. But in their engagement tends to be, and people, you'll see this a lot, and it's very true. Engagement tends to be really strong around issues rather than around the political landscape. So there might be very little interest in what Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael said in the Dáil yesterday, but you will have this, you know, incredibly strong interest in repeal, housing, and you know, it's I'm not telling people anything they don't know. You can see that in the streets. You can see what young people are engaged with. You can see around the marriage referendum, around the repeal referendum, around the housing movement now, that these are a lot of it's issue led. And obviously then you have the broader kind of interest in what's going on in the UK and the US. And that tends to be a topic of fascination as well.
And sadly, you don't teach shorthand anymore in these colleges, these journalists.
No, we do. We still offer shorthand as an option, but
does anybody take it up?
Yeah, some do. It's obviously a skill that has. It's still. I tell you, it's still a useful thing to have.
But it's like crochet or something.
The amount of scenarios in which it's useful are dwindling. But if you're down the courts, or if you're doing the Charlton Tribunal or something like that, you'd be very glad to have it, you know. But for a lot of work, you know, your phone is a recorder, and
I studied not Pitman's, which I would have. That's the kind of classic one. I studied a thing called T-line shorthand, and I got up to 90 words a minute, which survived, which did me okay in London. But when I went back to work in journalism in Ireland, literally people spoke at more than 90 words a minute. So it was I could handle it with the English council meetings, but as soon as I got to Ireland, I abandoned it. It just became a blur of hieroglyphics and
I always remember when I first started reporting, and we do I used to do kind of court cases, kind of, you know, when somebody be charged with a murder or something like that, and we'd all be furiously taking our notes, and then 10 of us would stand outside the court and we would agree what the guard had actually said. It may not have been what he said, but because the 10 of us agreed that it was what he said, then that was the quote that went in the paper the next day or went out. Well, and then obviously that stuff doesn't happen now because people just record everything. So
still on that bombshell, we shall leave it. Thank you very much, Ken Fox. Are you a real boffin? Are you a professor? Are you a doctor? Or do you have some
no
initials after your name?
No, no initials.
Mr. Ken Fox, lecturer at media and PR at Dublin Institute of Technology. I know that you have an early start in the morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It was, I have to say, fascinating for me. And, I hope for everybody else, Johnny as well. And
really enjoyed having you on, Ken.
We're going to FOI
Thank you
the
very
hell
much,
out of
everybody.
everything now. We're just going to cast the net wide. Ken, thank you very much.
No problem.
Good luck tomorrow.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, Ken. Kevin.
Hi.
Hello there, Kevin, and hello there, Johnny, and hello there, Vanessa. I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed that very much.
Well, Ken, you say he's a bit of a hero on Broadsheet. His persistence in FOI is quite inspiring. I follow his work very closely, as I'm sure you all do.
Yeah. Kevin, it's been a bit of a week with Minister Sapone. Kevin, just to remind viewers, is a lawyer and he advises the Tume Survivors Network. Oh, by the way, Peter Mulryan's documentary was on TG Carr last night. I haven't seen it, but Algo said it was incredibly moving. And
Yes,
and Peter sings at the end.
he does. He sings on the wings of a dove. I must say, I enjoyed it very much. There was nothing on it which took me by surprise, because at this point I know Peter extremely well. But I think when you get an opportunity to see it, and I'm sure, I don't know if the others have seen it yet, you will. I think your view of him will be reinforced. What a charming and dignified and wonderful human being he is. It does come out in the program. He is a wonderful man.
Well, there's Johnny is a friend.
A serious handball player as well, I'd say. He only started playing handball when he was 45. It was a beautiful documentary. I thought with the way it was shot as well, it was very kind of artistic, and it had this church music as well. And no irony, but I just thought it was just so powerful. And Peter just came across like an amazing man, and he is an amazing man. But his story was just very real and very sad. But I thought the priest, my God, because it was a TG Carr production, so you had a few of the contributors speaking Irish. I thought the priest was raving.
That's Michael. That's Michael McGreal, or Micheál McGreal. The remarkable thing is, I think you're correct. I think the primary reason that he was on is because he is a fluent Irish speaker.
Yeah.
But what I find quite hysterically funny, having watched him and listened and saw what he said last night, is that in the 70s, Micheál McGreal was regarded as one of the progressive and almost rebellious elements in the Catholic Church in Ireland. And when you look at him last night, you crack up at that very idea,
Yeah.
What was he very? What did you think of him, Johnny?
I just thought he was very, I don't know what the word is, cavalier, kind of, Actually, that's what happened then. We're all great now. And I don't know. It looked like he had a few taken on board, if I'm being honest, because he went off on a few ones, man. I was going, am I reading this right? Because he was speaking Irish and the subtitle was coming up. Am I missing something? But he just
I just want to say, Johnny, just in case. I mean, we're not suggesting that
I'm just trying to make sense of it, John. The guy didn't.
Of course, yeah. We're not suggesting that he was. It was
my opinion. Just my opinion.
Oh yeah, I know, but it was a combination of the Irish language, and it seemed.
Yeah, I suppose it was. Yeah, but I have to say I didn't agree with anything he said.
Okay.
If I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And I thought it took away from Peter's story, if I'm being honest as well. And I don't know whether that had something to do with the editors, because I thought Peter's story stand alone, and I didn't feel that I needed a representative from the Catholic Church, almost indirectly discrediting what he went through. That's what I thought.
That's interesting, Kevin.
It was a little incongruous. It almost disrupted the continuity of the story, because you would have a piece where Peter spoke directly to camera, and then you might have a short dramatized part of Peter's life. And what you then had was Micheál McGreal coming on and spouting all the usual cliches. And I'm told it was done for balance, but I mean, it was ludicrous. It was absolutely ludicrous. And the funny thing is that Micheál McGreal's quite an interesting man. He was a late vocation to the Catholic Church. I think he was, or to the priesthood. I think Micheál was approaching 30 when he went into a seminary. And then he went to UCD and he took out a doctoral thesis, or acquired a doctoral thesis, which was very fashionable in the early 70s about, I think it was prejudice and discrimination in Ireland or something. And it was regarded as a very socially aware piece of work. And it was highly regarded in its day. But he just looked like a crusty old apologist for the Catholic Church last night. Really, that's what he looked like.
But I thought that the best thing about it was that not that he needed to be humanized, but I just really gave a good human side of Peter that many people didn't know. I know I did a few interviews there with Vincent Brown and such, but just in relation to like beginning to play handball when he was 45 because he'd missed so much, to be never get outside a building for 4.5 years. You know,
And
horrific things to think about. Sorry, Kevin?
He competed in 3 senior All-Ireland finals.
Amazing. You know, people are wrapping up their career at 45. He was only starting. That's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Duxie was dead before he was 55, wasn't he? Duxie Walsh.
Yeah. But like I thought like it was really good to get Peter's story out there, and it could have went further, but that's another day. But at least that's the start in relation to where wasn't a big push on in relation to rallies or cries for against the state. It was a nice, beautiful, subtle documentary, and I would say that Kathleen as well, and all the people down in Tuam kind of sets it up nicely in relation to your event Sunday week or Saturday week rather.
Yeah, Kevin, the Remembrance Day is on the 28th, isn't it, of September?
We're going to have there is that concert which Johnny has probably told you a lot about. That's on the 29th.
Oh, the 29th.
But we're going to have what we describe as a funeral procession on the 6th of October through Dublin. We do not particularly aspire to it being the most momentous or the largest or the most impactful demonstration through Dublin. But what we do hope and intend to have are no less than 800 people bearing the representations of 796 small white coffins in the city of Dublin. And there will be some other aspects to it, but that is our intention on the 6th of October.
Sure, you need volunteers for that, would you, Kevin?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, and Johnny, I can promise you that we will prove to be quite adept at disseminating the material through the website and through social media in the interim. And it will be as simple, people will be made aware of what we're trying to do. And I have some faith that sufficient number of people will come out to bear the small representations of 796 small white coffins through the centre of Dublin. There are other aspects to it, but that is the bare bones of it just at the moment.
Okay, just go over that again then. So on the 6th of October, there'll be a funeral procession, and it'll represent a funeral for each of the up to 800 children who were buried in Tuam. And
that's correct.
And it won't have a religious connotation, I suppose.
No. If there's any religious connotation, it will be in the minds of individuals. What we intend to do is represent a funeral cortege for 796 children who never had one.
Yes.
So are we talking having 796 coffins lit, like, let's just say shoe boxes?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
We are going
in a line.
It may be several people abreast. We don't intend to disrupt more than possible, but
you can count on me there for that.
Thank you very much. I look forward.
I'm not making 798, lads. I'll put together. I'll figure out a way.
You don't have to make them all, you know.
No, listen.
There are practical difficulties. There are practical difficulties with organizing that, but we're taking a very simple view of it. We will be preparing a significant number, a very significant number, but we simply say that we feel that anybody just as Vanessa said she would like to be there. Anybody who genuinely wants to be there, I'm sure they have the capacity to go and find a small white shoebox and to place on that shoebox the name of one of the children of Tuam and bring it with them. And we will, of course, be publishing the full list of the named children, and people can decide to commemorate whichever child or randomly they would like to.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be pitch perfect. We're not going here for a mass, well-funded publicity stunt. We're going for the simple representation of a funeral cortege for these children, and I do believe we will get people to do it.
Yeah,
That's
well,
lovely. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thanks for organizing. There was a concert as well, did you say?
There is a what, again, it's not a fundraiser or designed to be a major event as such. It is a local event in Tuam, in the Coralie Hotel on the 29th of September. We are trying very hard. We cannot compete with government in terms of the manner in which it handles the media or controls media. But the work of informing people continues bit by bit. And we hope that, I believe the concert on the 29th will be a success. It's based in Tuam, and I do believe that with the goodwill, I believe there are enough people of goodwill and well disposed towards the symbolism of what we're doing on the 6th of October, that we will have people walking slowly through the city centre bearing these small coffins.
Well, that's wonderful. Kevin, thank you so much for that. And we'll put up links on
the concert starts
on the post.
It starts afternoon, doesn't it, Kevin? Sorry, John.
I'm sorry, John.
The concert, doesn't it? Starts in the afternoon.
It's an early start, yeah. It's up on the website, John. I think it's partially, if not entirely, sold out at this stage.
Okay.
But the link will be on the Tuam Survivors Home Network.
Okay, the Tuam Survivors Network website, but we'll have it up on the link when we do the post.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Not at all, my pleasure. I just want to get onto the presidency because.
Speaking of presidency, Jimmy said he'd come with me that day as well on the 6th.
Great.
Wonderful.
Great. That's brilliant.
Very, very welcome.
And give Jimmy our regards as well.
He's good. He's good.
Okay. And just on the presidency, I spoke this week with Kevin Sharkey, and I spoke this week with Gemma O'Doherty, and Kevin Sharkey pulled out on Tuesday. I think Gemma is running out of options, Johnny, is that right, in terms of...
Tonight, I thought it was good news. She had the nomination from Laois, Cork County and Kildare, and this evening, she was going for Dublin South.
South Dublin. Yeah.
South
Dublin, and they decided that they weren't going to run a candidate.
Well, I was there, Johnny, and she was nominated. She was proposed, and then she hadn't arrived at the time. And she was proposed, and was seconded and was going to a vote, and then she came in, and she gave her presentation. So she was allowed to give her presentation after everyone had finished, and they'd started voting, and then they proposed a motion not to propose anybody.
But why?
So if she hadn't arrived,
Why did they propose? Why did they propose? Sorry, Johnny. Why did they propose Vanessa? Why did they propose to not nominate anybody? Because of was there more scenes?
No. This was after the scenes. There was 2 more speakers after.
So she wouldn't have really been late then, I suppose.
Sorry. I was there, so you can.
If 2 spoke afterwards, she was hardly late.
No, John was asking about the scenes. Somebody was removed from the chamber. One of the hopefuls was removed. Sarah
Louise Mulligan.
Yes. Okay.
She said she felt she was being disrespected.
She was. Like, to be fair, one of the councillors was rude, was past a remark.
Okay.
And it was, he actually, the councillor should have been removed, to be honest.
And she asked for an apology and she demanded an apology, but then
yeah,
she was
no, she did overreact. I won't, and she did get down and went over to him to look for the apology, you know. But he was sneering because she was saying, "Excuse me, I'm here doing this," you know.
Well,
and he says, "Well, I'm a councillor," you know. He shouldn't have said anything in the first place. He kind of made a remark about, "Oh, you're not getting a vote anyway." Okay, and then she lost it, so she was removed. And then
I mean, if you've been traveling across the country, like,
but she has a driver.
Yeah, but irrespective, I mean,
we should be concentrating on how democracy has been murdered in the council.
How has it been murdered?
Well, but Vanessa, hang on, Johnny, 1 second.
Kenny, John.
Johnny, one moment. I'll let you speak now. I really will, Johnny. I'm not going to interrupt
let's talk about democracy, okay?
Okay, 1 second, Johnny. Okay, we are. Johnny, just 1 second. I did want to make this point, Vanessa, that if the disruptions in the council meetings are forcing the councillors to not endorse anybody.
No, but that's not what happened tonight.
Okay.
Another candidate then gave their speech.
But why did they vote? Why did they decide not to vote for a nomination?
And then, but Gemma wasn't there at all, and she was proposed.
I know, but why didn't they vote for a nomination?
Because then, well, this is okay. There was Goretti spoke, then Sarah Louise, and then Peter McGreal spoke, and then there was no other candidate in the room. No one else was there. So they were then preparing to nominate a candidate, and Gemma was one of the ones proposed. Okay. Then Gemma arrived late, and to be fair, they gave her 5 minutes and her questions and answers. They then decided. They proposed not to nominate anybody.
Okay, but what happened then? What happened between Gemma making her address?
But one of the councillors has told me has sent me messages here about the presentation.
About Gemma's presentation.
They just felt the one councillor. What's
his name or her name?
Johnny.
Hang on 1 second.
What is this?
Vanessa, please, everybody stay cool. Come on, please.
We have a name. So what's wrong with that?
No, we don't need names. There's a councillor, and we're going to get some inside information.
Public servants.
Johnny, 1 second. Come on.
Yeah, 1 second, John.
John, this is what this councillor is telling me. It's a people before profit councillor. I just asked, how did the other candidates get on? And she texted me back, they were a bit more professional. John wasn't terrible. She says GOD, so I'm reading as Gemma O'Doherty. Didn't answer where she stood on abortion, and she felt she'd move on from that debate, and we should unite behind corruption. And then there was other questions. Then she didn't answer, and so they then decided that they wouldn't nominate anybody.
But that doesn't make sense. Because of what Gemma said, that they weren't going to nominate anybody.
That's not what that tweet says. But I'm right to the council. Oh, I've already asked for a set of the minutes. So when
okay, no, but there wasn't any other indication of the reason why they would not nominate anybody.
No, but I have asked her to tell me who proposed her and who seconded her in the first instance.
Okay.
So to be fair, then Gemma arrived. So disrupted the meeting, I suppose. Not disrupted, that's the wrong word. Interrupted the meeting as they were preparing to take the vote. So they gave her full time on the podium and all her questions and answers. And they then proposed by a strong margin not to go with any of the candidates they saw.
Okay, so Johnny, have you any idea what the reason was then why they did not nominate?
Well, I wasn't there, but I was in Kilkenny, John, and I think there's a pattern going across this. Okay,
of course.
I think Jim O'Doherty is being crucified, 100%. Like they're doing their very best. I'm talking about Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. They have the majority of all the county councils. I think the Sinn Féin have 2 in Dublin, but they have the sway, and it's FFFG for me anymore. There's no differentiation between them. They've colluded, in such a way where they're definitely not going to have Gemma Doherty. Her manifesto is in corruption now. So they're saying there's no corruption here, nothing to see here. So what
Johnny,
just happened?
Vanessa, let Johnny speak now, really, because it's important that he's not interrupted, really, because.
Sorry, Johnny. Yeah,
Johnny, perhaps you could just tell us. Perhaps Johnny, you could tell us if what happened in Kilkenny the other night.
Okay, what happened in Kilkenny and Kilkenny is just an example of what happened to her throughout the country in relation to county councils, where Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have the majority, the sway of power, so they can dictate the vote. Yes, we understand that. So in Kilkenny, she was the only one nominated. She was proposed by Breda Gardner, an independent, and that was seconded by David Kennedy, Sinn Féiner. Now, so that meant that if everyone abstained, 24 councillors and 2 votes for Gemma, that means Gemma would have got through. But in the meantime, that wasn't good enough for Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, especially Fianna Fáil. They decided that they'd have their own motion to vote against Gemma Doherty, even getting the vote. So that meant that 5 people voted for her, 5 councillors voted for her, 7 voted against her, and 11 abstained. So that was very tactical in relation to just being able to. So that means that when she talks about corruption, and everyone says, oh, maybe she shouldn't talk about corruption, maybe she should just, there's ways of talking to these people. Listen, John, lads, these councillors are there to represent us, okay? Now, this is uncategorically fact. Gemma O'Doherty has thousands of people, maybe up to 10,000 people that will vote for her if there's a presidential election. So what's happening there is these public servants are stopping democracy from happening because it doesn't suit them, because she's going to talk about stuff that they don't want to talk about. Why won't Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil welcome a conversation about corruption? What if they got to hide? So they have, each council has gone directly for this woman, and democracy is dead in this country after tonight. I spent my while sending emails, phone calls, I talked to a few people, and they just don't seem to get us. They don't seem to get us. You don't have to. Hold on a second, I'm finishing this point. You don't have to agree with Gemma Doherty on anything. But the thing is that there is a mandate by a certain amount of people, myself included, that want to see Gemma Doherty on that ticket so that I have the chance to vote for her. And what's stopping her? Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael councillors. That's corrupt. Okay,
well, you can call that corruption.
Vanessa, before you start, I just want to sort of get a hello into Olga, who's joined us from town. Hello, Olga. And also Kevin Higgins is still with us. Thank you, Kevin.
You can bug off anytime you like, John.
No, please stay. Please stay.
Sorry, can I? What Johnny's calling?
We're probably going to need a lawyer for the next.
What Johnny's calling corruption is voting pacts. They've had voting pacts for centuries. They rotate mayoral jobs. They rotate chair jobs. But you see, this is one. I'm going to go back to this in a sec, right? But the council elections are next year, folks. And it's the easiest election you can run in. You can just walk in, put in your nomination, and go and get the vote out. It's not an expensive election.
Sorry, okay, Vanessa, we're talking about the
so, like, if you've an issue like this, the doors are
open. Gemma Doherty, democracy.
Okay, well, you can call us corrupt. That's the point. Right, do you know what, John? Call Johnny, corruption all you like. It is not a secret. It's not a secret.
Vanessa, guys.
That's what it is. It is.
Johnny.
Oh.
Vanessa. I know you're upset.
Are corrupt to the fucking core.
Johnny.
Sorry, look, there's Vanessa, been it's no secret.
One second.
I was the one speaking, John.
You're very cool. Johnny is upset, and
I'm not upset. Just pissed off, John.
It's okay. Okay. It's been a very, very upsetting time actually at the moment in every sense, and the trolling and everything, and this candidacy.
Well, we'll talk about the trolls in a sec, Johnny.
But one second, Vanessa.
Everybody's going to be vindicated in all this anyway. I can guarantee you that.
Johnny.
Well, actually, Johnny, I can tell you now that
Vanessa, you're having a. Johnny, I'm asking.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Do you know what? I'll write it up. You're fine.
I've seen it all this week.
You're fine.
It's okay. Johnny, one second.
All right.
Vanessa, 1 second. You're getting upset. Johnny's getting upset.
I'm not getting upset at all.
Okay.
He can rant and rave all he likes. I can write
He's
it
not
up and
ranting and
put it
raving.
out there.
He's not ranting and raving.
You've done enough as well.
Vanessa, Johnny is
I beg your pardon?
You've done enough ranting and raving yourself.
When?
Vanessa, you can hold your own. Everybody can hold their own. Now we're going to try and get a little bit civilized here. The addresses before the Dublin City Council and the addresses before South Dublin Council seem to have been disrupted.
Yeah, they were badly.
Okay, badly disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
Not by Gemma O'Doherty, though.
No, well, she. I suppose one of the councillors.
Vanessa, can I just finish? I'll just finish the point on my
Yeah.
here. The point is that the person Bunty.
Yeah.
Is the reason that those two meetings didn't nominate somebody.
Oh,
now the purpose of this Bunty, I'm on.
sorry, hang on a second. You saying that the reason why Dublin City Council didn't nominate anybody and the reason why South Dublin didn't nominate is because of Norma Burke?
No, it wasn't that the disruption though.
No, it wasn't.
At Dublin City Council was the
No.
What was the disruption then? Because the addresses.
Sorry, Dublin City Council was Mannix Flynn objecting, and then all the other candidates gave their speech, and then Dublin City Council decided not to nominate anybody.
But on the basis of the address made by Bunty.
So sorry, are you saying the councillors decided not to listen to any of the other candidates?
No, after the disruption with Bunty, they decided that they wouldn't nominate.
But they didn't nominate anyone. Kilkenny. Are you blaming her? Are you blaming Norma Burke for that as well?
No, I think Johnny explained that the fix was in Kilkenny.
Yes, but you see, in councils all over the country, for decades, there's been voting pacts between Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour, and that's why they take turns being Lord Mayor or being taking turns of being Assistant Lord Mayor. And that is not a secret.
Appreciate that. The two meetings I'm discussing.
But that's not corruption.
The two meetings, forget the word corruption.
No, they were nominating a candidate in South Dublin this evening. Bunty wasn't allowed to speak.
But they didn't because of the disruptions that were made.
The disruption was. Jesus
but the disruptions were not made by.
Listen, if that's the game, because a man came up to me.
That's the reason that was given.
No. A man came up to me down there today and told me he was there for Gemma and he'd filmed the lot. So, he can do. I don't know. He told. That's what he told us.
But what
and
he
said he filmed the lot.
What are you trying to suggest?
You're trying to say that they didn't nominate because of Norma Burke.
In Dublin City Council, it was explicitly stated that the disruptions from her address, in which people were.
So you're automatically assuming that Gemma would have got the nomination.
I didn't. Excuse me.
So why? Look, they didn't nominate anybody.
But they didn't nominate anybody on the basis of one person who came in and was a comedy act. And is this democracy? And you think that this is okay? Is it?
Well, I'm not saying it's okay or not. I want councillors to do their job. And this was one of the things I wanted to get back to, is one of the biggest disappointments for me this time round. I didn't pay attention the last time, I suppose, but being at some of the nominating meetings and watching some of the live streams from some of them, was that how appallingly bad and poor your local councillors are. Some of them can't speak. They can't stitch two words together. Completely incompetent and incapable.
Okay.
And the amount of absenteeism and the abstentions and the behaviour. I mean, I saw like the tweeting from the chambers.
Yeah, well,
tagging people off from the chambers.
Well,
and that has been the biggest disappointment.
Vanessa, we're
and I have to say, John, and the suggestion that Dublin City Council decided, the biggest council in the country, by the way, decided not to nominate a candidate because they thought, oh, well, they're all going to be like Norma Burke. They got presentations from all of them. If none of them were impressive enough to make a nomination for Dublin City Council to back, that is not a comedian or an actor's fault.
I'm not blaming
it's up to the councillors to represent their client.
Vanessa, I'm not blaming the comedian or whoever that person is. I'm saying that the councillors used her appearance and her address as a reason for not nominating anybody. They said that
because she pointed out the thing had turned into a joke.
By her.
Oh, so the Dragons are all right then?
Well,
so they're not the joke.
But they're serious candidates. She's not. I mean, it's not like Lord Bucket.
That's fair enough.
But she's making fun of a process in which she is actually destroying herself within her own act.
Well, I sat on this show 2 weeks ago, and I listened to one of the candidates, okay?
Yeah.
And then after the show, Johnny tweeted like a snapshot of it. And in that snapshot, the only thing that's contained is talking about Gemma's previous employer. Now, to me, that's a private HR issue. I would have done something very different. The most important point Gemma made that night, as far as I'm concerned, just me, and I'm only one voter, was that county councils only have to do this once every 7 years. And they're not going to cooperate with the potential candidates. This only started with Dana. They didn't have to do it for decades since the founding of the state. And so, like, that was the most important point I thought Gemma made that would have really done her favours, was that these councils only have been asked to do this once every 7 years.
Okay, well instead
all the Gemma fans decided to parse a bit and talk about Gemma's private HR issue with her former employer.
Vanessa.
With the
greatest respect, as a professional yourself, how you could describe what happened to Gemma O'Doherty at I&M, a publicly listed company, how you can describe that as a private HR issue.
But it's not a presidential matter. It's not a presidential matter, John.
It does imply what you really think of Gemma O'Doherty. And
I don't. Listen out.
Very obvious.
So now we know who's feeding the trolls.
Come now.
I never said a word about Gemma. Not a word. I actually supported her.
Whoa! Can I have a word in here, John?
I never said anything like that. At least now I know who put some of those words into those trolls' mouths.
Excuse me, are you suggesting that I did that?
No, but you just said I said something about Gemma and I didn't.
No, hold on. Whoa, just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. This is getting ridiculous.
It's not a private HR issue if you're fired for doing your job, which involves more stepping to guard.
It's not a presidential issue,
John. You knew that, Vanessa.
But then why was it an issue? Why was that the part taken from her one-to-one interview with you? And I'm just saying, I thought the most important point she made was that it.
Yes, I know, and thank you, and we appreciate that.
That's what I would have spawned. And instead now you're saying that I have contempt. You use the word contempt, John, and that is totally unfair. And you know the trolling that I've had to put up with in the last week. And now I know.
Vanessa, excuse me. Now you know that I'm involved in the trolling.
No, I didn't say that. But now I know that if that's the attitude of Broadsheet, that I said that, and I never said that.
Said what?
Use the word contempt. You did.
I didn't say that you used the word contempt, but
you did. No, you said it summed up my attitude, and I actually don't have an attitude. I don't have an attitude to her. I said good evening to her today, and she walked straight past us.
You don't want to go there with me on this now. You don't. You really don't.
Why not?
I'm gonna leave it now. No, because you don't, and we don't want to go there. Okay. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, obviously there are strong feelings. I will, if I may, express a view about Gemma. Now, I know Gemma slightly. I won't say I know particularly well. And I do agree, and I don't think anybody is saying to the contrary, that the treatment that was meted out to her by her former employer was appalling. And in fact, on foot of that, she probably got record damages for that treatment. Now, she went through the EAT, and as you all are probably aware, is that just as a basic rule, the EAT can only award somebody who has brought their claim for unfair dismissals before them twice their normal salary. Now, I guarantee you that Gemma walked away many multiples of her previous salary with independent news and media. And quite frankly, she gave them in that forum a bloody good kicking. And the only reason why that never went to a full hearing is that it would have been unspeakably embarrassing for INM to have had all that vented. Now, as it happens, they're going to have a lot of other crap vented shortly as the office of the director of the Office of Corporate Enforcement carries on his work. So, you know, I mean, as an entity, it's pretty stained anyway. What I would say about Gemma, I think we're all too hung up. None of us, as far as I know, was present at any of those meetings. I think the one thing that can be agreed on is that the conduct of local authority meetings are pretty horrible stuff anyway, and they're not conducted at a particularly high level of discourse or intelligence at times. I have a sympathy for Gemma in one regard, in that I do not think that this was the wisest. There are many things which causes which Gemma espouses and talks about, which I think anybody would find very seductive and would embrace. But I do not think that this was the best route for her to go to do that. I thought from the beginning that it would be personally damaging for her. The behavior of some of the councils, and I know Johnny has strong feelings that it was concerted, but to be perfectly frank, I don't think any other candidate, possibly like Gemma, would have suffered a different fate. I also think that the ghastly idea of three, what I regard as shyster businessmen, actually getting nominations.
Well, hang on.
Comes down to the fact that they have played. I know I shouldn't describe them as such.
You shouldn't really know. No, I mean,
No, I shouldn't, and I apologise, chaps.
Please, no,
But-
they're not. They're not.
No, you're not shysters. You're all simply wonderful fellows.
Some of
no
the best
doubt-
dragons I've ever met.
Dragons, well, reptiles, whatever dragons are, but no doubt all of them are good, kind to women, children, and animals, clean about the house, and all will give more than their tithe.
Yes.
However, it was they played the game.
Yeah, they
They
did.
went along, they pressed the flesh. I don't know what else they did, but what Gemma did is what Gemma does. She charged at them with a lance. She did, because that's what Gemma does.
Yeah.
She was, come on, guys, come on, here I am, come on, hit me.
Well, she
I
wasn't
think
like that really, but the Joan Freeman actually had it down to a T. She spoke at she just barely mentioned the fact that she was involved in Pieta House. She barely mentioned the fact that she was, you know, just her background. It was all about what she was bringing to the presidency. And one of the councils gave them all 15 minutes. And she went on about the presidency. You see, they all focused on the presidency, barely mentioned their backgrounds at all, maybe for 60 seconds or as part of an answer to a question when they did the Q&As, because the way the questions are, they're all stacked up. 6, 7, 8 councillors will ask a question one after the other. And so the candidate has to answer them in turn or try and answer two at the same time. And like they stuck to the knitting. Joan Freeman, if you can see any of Joan Freeman's and she's not nice to listen to. She's kind of difficult to listen to. There's no drama or melody in her voice. And she's very hard to listen to, but she had that down. And
Okay.
even during the questions, she'd go back to the councillor, say, I know it was you that asked me now, but make sure I have it right. And she was engaging like that. She had it down to a T. And one thing I'd say about Kevin Sharkey, actually, is that he was very good on his feet. He was brilliant on his feet. And I'm disappointed he pulled out. And because
He pulled out for the very reason that you and Johnny have fallen out.
yeah, but that's
very
the vote.
reason.
But you see, you can't call a pact that's public knowledge corruption.
He calls it corruption. You call it tomato. You know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I know I
what
do, and
Johnny's
I don't
talking
agree
about.
with it
Stop
either.
nailing us down to this word
Yeah,
corruption.
well, okay, but I don't agree with it either. I think
don't
it's
think so?
shabby, and I think that the standard of our councillors is shameful. I saw a guy, or it was the Dublin one. I'm not going to say which one. and he was a Sinn Féin guy. And I tell you, if he could put two words together without nearly collapsing, shaking, he was, and that doesn't mean he doesn't mean well or he wants to serve his people, but if he can't speak up in chambers, or if he can't speak up at sub meetings or at housing meetings or on behalf of his constituents that are in difficulty, they don't stand a chance. It's shocking that the quality of their abilities was for me was the biggest eye opener for me.
Vanessa,
but just on Kevin Sharkey, I found actually he was standing up for himself brilliantly. And in one way, I'm sorry people didn't see more of that.
Okay, there's an interview with him. There's an interview actually on the site with him. Olga, thanks, Vanessa. Tomorrow's papers, we have the Examiner and the Times Ireland edition has come in, hasn't it? Oh, we've lost your mic, have we, Olga? Oh, we can't hear you.
John?
Yeah, we can't hear you. Johnny?
I just make a point about Offaly.
Please.
When Gemma was there last Monday week in Kilkenny, she had a fairly good reception as far as she was concerned. I live in Kilkenny. I didn't think that it was that easy, because I looked around and I looked at Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil and I go, I don't think, but Gemma being positive as much as she can. And she actually just went in, and her pitch, I've seen it twice, in Kilkenny and Offaly. And I've seen this somewhere else as well, online, I think. The pitch is quite simple. She talks about her career as an investigative journalist in the public interest. Now, she went into Offaly after a very hard grilling in Kilkenny, and that was Manic Monday or whatever. She had to be in 5 different places. Monday, so she could only be in 3. So she went down to Offaly into the Lion's Den. Now let's remember, Father Malai, the case, she got reopened, and Pat Rabbitt said would shake the foundation of Leinster House. Right, So she went down there and she talked about what's her connection with Offaly. And not alone Father Malai, there was 2 other murder cases that she wrote extensively about in Offaly.
Okay, yeah.
Fianna Fáil Offaly decided that they were going to vote for, or they weren't going to vote for anyone, because Gallagher had already got his 4 nominees, so they weren't going to vote for. Now, they could have voted for Jim Doherty, but they said that the reason that they got behind Gallagher, not because he was a Fianna Fáil guy, but because his mother, get this,
family there.
Woman. Now, forget about the fact that Jim Doherty wrote extensively about 3 murders. You know, the way everyone's going on about it, like she was the one who actually murdered him. Do you know what I mean? And that's the point.
Yeah, Johnny. Sorry. Yeah, Johnny.
It's just crazy.
The thing about it is, like,
it's crazy, man.
Yeah, it is. It's just got really very, very intense. And
there's a lovely message up there on the board there now, John. It's from Selena. Who'd have thought Vanessa was on South Dublin County Council? Well, fuck me. GOD didn't stand a beggar's chance. You're one wicked biatch. Now, I'm putting this out there now, people. I want someone to produce one line where I have discredited Gemma or knocked Gemma or have not supported her.
But Vanessa, I want
it out there now. You hosted all this all week now, and
Vanessa,
let's have it.
But Vanessa, you understand that you're not on very good ground here on this, lady.
What did I say about the girl? I offered her advice about I mentioned about going to the Senate. Vanessa. And she wasn't interested. What am I supposed to do about that?
Everyone's a genius in relation to telling her what to do.
Vanessa,
I was asked a question by John.
Vanessa, I think just the self-righteousness. I don't
have... John, you asked me a question and I answered, and now Johnny's then saying I'm giving her advice.
But
don't ask me questions about her then.
Vanessa,
this is all a setup now.
Excuse me?
This is the setup.
Vanessa, I'm talking about everyone in the country is giving her advice.
The issue is with maybe the possibility that you might be using other identities that are not consistent with whom you are. That is the problem here.
What?
That's what the issue is. You talk about contempt.
What contempt?
Vanessa, I don't wish to go here with you.
You're saying I'm trolling people. Who am I trolling?
Vanessa, sometimes people don't operate under their own name.
Yeah, I know
that there might be a possibility.
I get that the Friendly King gig is up. You were happy to plug it as much as you could over the last 6 months. I get it, it's up.
But everybody knows.
And as far as I'm concerned, I'm using it's the same relationship as J.K. Rowling has with James Galbraith.
But you appreciate
We're very good friends.
You appreciate
so
that.
Who else is it?
You appreciate that Freddie Keane has a completely different view are a completely
No,
different.
no. You know what? Find one for me. I asked you on the site at least 5 times last weekend. Find one remark where I or Freddie Keane has said something about Gemma. And as far as I know, there was one post back in August where her name was used. So find it now. Come on. You're hosting it there now. Leave it up and stand over it.
Well,
no, because you're very quick to set them all on me, and you're you know, you meant it trolling, and people then wonder why this isn't in the Rs.
No, excuse me, you're confusing two things here. I don't troll. I've never trolled.
Well, we know hang on now a second. We know for a fact that one of them was on the show.
How do you mean?
Because they said it in the post. They were able to describe me, and they'd met me.
Sorry,
You must have deleted it before you read it.
Deleted what?
One of the Gemma trolls. And that's fine. I don't care if you troll. I'm able for it. Don't worry about it, kids. But Johnny sang an aria there a couple of weeks ago about how we should all be civil online and we should all have decency. There'd be no harm if you tried it yourselves, Johnny.
Well, you're going to have to be
trying to pin something on me that is absolutely not true.
Listen,
you're trying, and I would have supported Gemma. I would have supported Gemma. I would have supported Gemma.
It's not to do with you, Vanessa.
If she had declared, honestly, if Gemma had declared her intention to run before Jimmy, I would have had a very different position. And just because I've been called out, why aren't you? No, you see, you're saying, you and your pals are out there saying, because I met one of them tonight, right? And he told me he knew you, Johnny. And you're out there saying, because I'm not supporting Gemma, I'm against her. That's what you're saying. You're saying because I'm not writing.
It's not. You're not important.
No, and John Ryan is feeding this. John Ryan is feeding this, and it's completely untrue.
Vanessa, I'm not feeding.
Untrue, John.
Vanessa,
that is very untrue. I have not said one word.
Vanessa, I'm not
just because I wrote about Jimmy. There's an automatic assumption. Just because I wrote about Jimmy and did up the R's or whatever, or I know Bunty, right? The relationship with Bunty grew because she was doing a video with Jimmy before he pulled out. All right? There was no other. There was no, and for you to be saying that they decided not to go ahead with a nomination, that's bullshit. And saying that I wasn't supporting Gemma, it's complete pack of lies. I was supporting Jimmy. And if Gemma had announced her candidacy even 2 weeks before that.
Okay, Vanessa, I want to just say
and it's really, and I really do think I deserve an apology for what I was accused of here again this evening, because there has been not one word have I said to demean her or to not encourage her chances. And Johnny, you are so wrong when you said I was giving her advice. John Ryan asked me a question and I answered it.
Vanessa,
and actually, you can hear her sneering very loudly in the show when he asked me that question.
Okay, I'm just going to go to Olga. Olga, just to see if what's in tomorrow's papers. But we'll just return to this briefly. I'm very sorry about about all this. Okay, Olga, can you hear us, or can we hear you? Actually, Olga, can we hear you? Hello, Olga. Okay. I'll tell you what, if you just pull down the papers, I can read out the headlines. Okay, this is the Times Ireland edition. Humiliation from May as EU rejects Brexit plan. Leaders, okay. Going to the Irish Examiner, PAC insists on RS cost inquiry. That could be interesting in terms of Kevin and in terms of Michael D. Higgins's campaign. I know that there's been a lot of talk about his expenses and whatnot, and he has promised to pay back money that was whatever. Bunny Carr was TV Gold. That's it. I'm very, very sorry about this evening, about the row. It's real life. Vanessa is a friend of the show, and as a contributor, Freddie Keane has been with the site for many years. So,
but but you were dying to have it out there, John. So you dropped enough hints, and so did Johnny. In fact, one of his trolls reminded me that it was what you said about me.
Vanessa,
one second.
I'm fighting Jim O'Doherty's corner. If you want to take that personally, it's on your ego.
But you're taking it personally.
I'm here.
Hang on now, Johnny, John.
I'm here to talk about how Jim O'Doherty's been treated by the whole
nobody's
country.
talking about how I've been treated by it all. Like you're taking it personally because I actually went behind Jim. I was supporting Jimmy. Before I even met Gemma, before even Gemma appeared on the show.
I've no idea what that's got to do with anything.
Okay.
It has everything to do with it, Johnny. It has everything to do with it. Just because I got in behind Jimmy before she even
democracy is dead in this country. Irish people talk about standing up for the underdog. They talk about we need someone to shake it up. Someone shakes it up. Then
Johnny, 1 second. 1 second. I think it's.
I mean, that's the only thing I did wrong was that I cheered on Jimmy before Gemma even announced her campaign.
No
one cares, Vanessa. No one cares what you did. It's irrelevant.
Okay.
Do you know what? It cares to me when I have been criminally trolled.
Vanessa.
Well, don't start pointing your finger at me, girl, because I've no interest.
They were in your name.
Anything you have to say.
Vanessa, hang on one second.
And you have a lovely beauty here doing
please,
it.
Vanessa, please,
Johnny.
Vanessa, please, Johnny.
You're off the mark, Vanessa.
Johnny, please. I don't wish to mute
anyone.
I beg your pardon. Sorry. I just want to thank very much earlier Ken Fox for coming in, Kevin Higgins and Olga Cronin from the Sheet. Sorry about the row. I want to thank Johnny Keenan very much, and I also want to thank Vanessa Foran. I also want to say that we do this for nothing. We've done it for nothing for 8 years. We try and provide a platform for different voices. We try and defend the underdog if we can. That's all we do. We don't troll. We don't create fake identities to hurt other people or any of these things. We're just trying to give a platform for voices, for alternative voices. And I'm sorry that sometimes it can get very fractious. But I know Johnny and I know Vanessa, and they're huge-hearted, big, very, very decent people. And we'll get over this. And thank you so much. And very sorry for the...
well, all I can say is no one from Jimmy's support team trolled anybody.
Vanessa, well, we all backed Jimmy Smith. That was
that was my big mistake. I shouldn't have bothered getting
the whole
in
country has trolled.
No, Johnny, Vanessa, please.
That's what's happening here, John.
Please, this is nothing.
That's the main story.
Okay, this is nothing to do with. This is nothing to do with. Nothing to do with Jimmy Smith, and we say hello to Jimmy. I'm going to say goodnight now. Thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully, we'll see you on the site tomorrow, or you can. We'll see you here next week. Thank you very much. Thanks.